Happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. We're speaking with Jack Williams today, our state representative from at least Vestavia. It's District what?
District 47.
47. I can't keep up with the numbers. Jack is very active in the demise of the UAB football program and trying to get it back on track. Jack, what's going on with that?
Well, we've had a lot of back and forth. The media has certainly picked up on this. I think it's been the biggest story in Birmingham since December 2nd, and the biggest sports story in the state since December 2nd.
Well, it breaks my heart to see what's happened to the program, and I was one of the ones that felt like we never should have had a football program to begin with. And I used to butt heads a little bit with Scotty McCallum in Vestavia, who said, well, you can't be a university on a Division I level if you don't have everything. So we start from essentially club football,
right,
with volunteer coaches and take it to a point where it really seems to be going in an upward move, and then we let the air out of the balloon overnight.
It was horrible and so unnecessary. And Tommy, in all honesty, I kind of came the same path you did. When Coach Bartow was a good friend of mine, and when they started talking about football, I really thought, oh, is that really necessary? And then over the years, I'd hear Coach Bartow talk about the struggles with the board, and sometimes I even thought, oh, that's a little overplayed, until I got a really up-close look at how the fear that UAB administrators operated under. And I think UAB is the only place I've ever seen where you have to worry about losing your job because you do it too well.
And when you say the fear, you're talking about the fear of repercussion from the Board of Trustees at the Tuscaloosa?
Well, you know, this is a three-campus system, Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, and Huntsville, and these are supposed to be three separate but equal boards. I saw prior to the board meeting in February that Karen Brooks compared the three campuses to children and said that you love them all equally. But I spoke to a civic group recently and asked, how many of you believe Dr. Watts made this decision all by himself? No one raised their hand. I said, how many of you believe the Board of Trustees treats UAB fairly and equitably? And
they all raised their hand.
No, actually they all laughed out loud. I mean, the audience burst into laughter, and there's just such a terrible disconnect between this board and this community, because no one here believes that UAB gets a fair shake from the Board of Trustees. And the Board of Trustees, based off the February board meeting and what I saw, they don't even know there's a problem.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was watching a TV interview of one of the ladies on the Board of Trustees in Tuscaloosa, who said, I didn't even know this was going down, or words to that effect. I don't remember which one said it, but I find that to even be even worse, that they're that much out of the loop. Or do we want them in the loop or out of the loop?
Well,
it seems to me that it was made by one person. Are you saying that Dr. Watts unilaterally decided to gut the football program?
He claims that he did. No one really believes that. I think most everybody
he claims that
he claims that he made this decision by himself.
Well, that's not right either, is it?
No, there's a whole principle of shared governance in higher education, and you bring stakeholders in. And the really tragedy here is there was never any effort to say, we have a problem, how can we fix it? He just up and said, hey, we're ending the football program.
And kept it to himself essentially until he did.
Denied it would even happen until even a day or two beforehand, until he made the announcement on December 2nd.
Well, a lot of people feel that, particularly for this upcoming 2015 season, that it's essentially impossible to put it back together.
There will not be football at UAB in 2015. We are working hard to bring football back for the 2016 season.
And I know we're going to talk about probably in the next segment some things that are going on in Montgomery with respect to that. But do you believe that to be a viable goal that can be achieved?
I do. There have been some, there's a committee, a task force in place now that'll be reviewing the numbers in the Carr report. And the Carr report has, by CBSSports.com, by Vice Sports, been widely discredited. No one who cares about their public credibility embraces the findings of the Carr report. It underestimated the conference revenue that UAB was receiving. The numbers they gave for contributions to UAB football didn't even match the numbers that UAB had filed with the IRS. It was just wrought with mistakes and painted a picture much more bleak than should have been, and some wonder if that was a deliberate act.
We don't have time to go into it right now specifically, but we will when we come back. But I'd be curious to know, one, who is Carr, and two, who's on the task force that's in place now. We'll be right back. Don't go away. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. We're speaking with Jack Williams, state representative from District 47, which is the Vestavia area and includes some other areas.
Vestavia and Hoover in the Rocky Ridge Fire District.
Yeah. When we were about to go to break, you mentioned the Carr report, and I asked, who's Mr. Carr, or who is Carr? And I would also like to know who's involved in this task force.
Bill Carr and Associates is a group that helps with searches and does feasibility studies for college athletic programs.
Is he local?
No, Bill Carr is the former athletic director at the University of Houston and the University of Florida. And when he left Florida, he started this executive search committee. UAB used him in two or three previous searches, I guess, for when Garrett McGee was hired and when Bill Clark was hired. And then he was contracted to take an overall look at the sports program, the athletic program at UAB, and the study was sold to everyone on the basis of this is going to show us what we need to do to become competitive in all sports at Conference USA.
And so, does he charge a fee for that? I trust
he does charge a fee. I think it depends on the school he's working with, the services they want. I don't remember exactly what the fees were for the two coaching searches, but I understand that thus far UAB has paid over $80,000 for the initial Carr report, a report incidentally that was never completed.
Does Mr. Carr defend his report? He's been very quiet.
Mr. Carr has been deathly quiet.
Yeah.
But Dr. Watts has continued to point to that report as the basis for his decision to terminate the football program, even as more and more errors and problems with that report have come to light. At this point, Dr. Watts is still clinging to that report.
So even though what it appears to be garbage in, garbage out.
I think that's very well put. So.
Thank you. That's an accounting term. It's the only thing I remember from my accounting class at Auburn, I think, from those days. Did you go to Auburn?
I did not. So
where did you go?
I went to Southeastern Bible College.
Okay.
So.
All right. That used to be up on Nazuma.
Yes, and that's down on Valleydale Road.
They
went to 280 and then out on Valleydale
Road. Now, the task force that was formed, who's on it and what is it trying to do?
Well, the task force has been asked to select a team, an accounting team, to review the Carr numbers. And if they only review the Carr numbers, they're going to come to the same conclusion. But so the task force needs to have a broader scope to look at the impact that football has in the community, judge some of the intangibles related to the football program?
It would seem to me that they need to go back a step further to acquire the correct information.
Absolutely.
That may have flawed the Carr report to begin with.
The Carr report was based off of 2013 numbers, which was the low ebb at UAB football, their 9th consecutive losing season, a wildly unpopular coach. In 2014, the team increased their attendance by 130%. And even in 2013, at 2-9, operationally, football broke even.
Yeah.
And we've been told football's a money loser, and that just was not the case.
No, that's what Mr. Kraft was telling us. It's one of the larger revenue generators for the athletic program.
So the task force includes Wes Smith, the president of the UAB Alumni Association, Don Heyer, a local businessman, Frank Messina, the faculty athletic representative, Angela Wagle, who is the undergraduate student body president, who did an incredible job at the February board meeting, I might add, of laying out the reason for the no confidence vote on Dr. Watts by the undergraduate students, and expressed her disappointment in the board's response to the no confidence vote with the faculty and undergraduate students.
Now, when you say the board, you mean the Tuscaloosa board?
The board, the UA system board of trustees. But I think calling them the Tuscaloosa board is probably a pretty, that's how most folks perceive them.
Well, isn't there a board that runs UAB itself?
No.
There's not like a sub-board or something?
No, there is no sub-board.
Oh.
But this board with 15 members, 13 of them are graduates from Tuscaloosa. 2 are graduates from UAB. One of the UAB graduates spent 3 years in Tuscaloosa and followed her husband here to go to medical school. So it's a very Tuscaloosa-centric board, and I think when they get in the room together or when they're talking on the phone, they're thinking about what's best for Tuscaloosa, and then we do this other stuff. The board is spending thousands and thousands of taxpayer dollars in the month of February, spent in the month of February, thousands of dollars, telling everybody in Birmingham how much they love UAB and how they invested $130 million at UAB. Of course, during that same time, they invested over $1 billion in the Tuscaloosa campus. But they gave it no context.
Well, I mean, it's really comparing apples and oranges in terms of revenue generators in athletics, particularly in football.
In athletics, but if you look at the overall system, it's also like comparing apples and oranges, because UAB generates about $2.6 billion, and Tuscaloosa generates about $900 million, and then about $600 million is generated by the Huntsville campus. So the revenue generated by UAB is about 150% more than Tuscaloosa and Huntsville combined.
Well, hold that thought. I want to talk about what's going on in Montgomery when session starts this week. Right. We'll be right back. This is Our Issues Birmingham with Jack Williams. Thank you very much for being here. Don't go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. Jack Williams, District 47 representative to the state legislature from the Hoover, Vestavia, and Rocky Ridge Fire District area, is with us, and we're talking about UAB and the demise of the football program. But there's good news on the horizon, we hope. Legislative session starts soon.
Yes.
And you've got some things in mind. Why don't you kind of give us a little preemptive strike of what's going on? Sure.
Well, March 3rd is the first day of the session. March 10th will be UAB Day in Montgomery, and we'll have a lot of UAB folks there. And I would urge folks, if you feel passionately about what's going on our campus and at UAB, come to Montgomery March 10th, find your legislator, and ask them to support my legislation. But I have 3 bills that I'll be dealing with in the legislative session. Tommy, the first bill requires SACS training for all public university board members.
Say that again. What
it
kind
requires
of training?
SACS training, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, that gives the accreditation to all schools and universities, and this
requires the training for who?
For board members. For to understand SACS guidelines so they don't violate those guidelines. You know, in the last 15 years, we've had 3 public universities in the state who have gone on SACS probation.
Alabama
State, Auburn, and West Alabama, all 3. Right now, SACS is on the UAB campus, and they had to bring in an extra person to investigate all the complaints about the board.
I don't want to go into what all those complaints may have been, because we may have to do a whole show on that. But so there's a bill you're introducing that requires trustee people to not just be appointed and go off and do what they have no training to do, except by OJT, on the job training, and they learn as time progresses. What's another bill you got coming in?
Second bill would restore football at UAB. And I think we can do this with a local act. That's what we're attempting to do. And I can't imagine that any of our local folks wouldn't support this legislation.
And how does that circumvent, for lack of a better expression, the Board of Trustees? I mean, can you do that? Can you legislate that?
Well, you know, Alabama and Auburn play, because they played in 1907 and didn't play again for 41 years, and only played when the legislature threatened to withhold funding from
They're not even Sicilian? They got in a fight?
They got in a fight, and those grudges went for a long time, and there was the legislature finally had to threaten funds for the system, for the 2 systems, if they didn't play again. And
so that's what got that done.
Yes, yeah, and our state's got a richer heritage because of that rivalry. The third bill I have would restructure the UA System Board of Trustees and would add members from the Birmingham and Huntsville location. Huntsville is part of the system, and there's no one from Huntsville that's on the board. I'm not even sure if those board members have ever been to Huntsville. They're so disconnected from things. But what my bill would do is create appointees from the alumni associations. It would also, right now, these 3 separate but equal campuses, the Tuscaloosa, the congressional district with the Tuscaloosa
separate
campus,
but not so equal.
Yeah, well, the congressional district that has the Tuscaloosa campus gets an extra board member. We are definitely adding board members from the Birmingham and Huntsville congressional districts.
So what your bill is trying to do is not necessarily separate the university system, but just to include the Birmingham people and the Huntsville people in the existing trustee makeup in Tuscaloosa.
Yes, and I'm not opposed to separation. I think there are some positive aspects to the system, but if I've said in a couple of interviews that we're a family, and I'm trying to get the board to come to family counseling so we don't wind up in divorce court. And I'm fearful that if they don't, we're going to wind up with 3 separate boards.
Which would be an even bigger nightmare.
It would present some challenges.
What's the support? I know there's some pre-talk going on, I'm sure, about support. Let me back that up. It becomes, first it gets introduced as a bill and has to go through the House and the Senate and then signed by the Gov.
That's true, and changing the board is a constitutional amendment. It would require 62 votes in the House, 21 in the Senate, and a majority vote of the people in 2016. And
a constitutional amendment?
Well, because the UA system is set up, the University of Alabama is set up by a constitutional amendment.
Which would make amendment number 3,000?
Pick a number.
We need, that's a whole nother show we could do on restructuring our Constitution in the state of Alabama.
And that's why I'm pushing to restructure the board. I think that's easier to get to 62 with a board restructuring.
62 is the total number of trusts? Oh, 62 votes.
Yeah.
Well, how many people are on the board now?
There's, including the governor and the superintendent of education, there's 17. My bill would expand it to 31.
Okay, so you would not necessarily remove anyone
would not remove
from
anyone.
the existing board, but you would just make the board larger.
And more voices. And I think sometimes if you got someone that'll stand up in the room and say, whoa, wait a minute, this is wrong, that it brings people back from the edge.
Okay, last question. I am concerned about the players as well as all the power people that are trying to jockey for positions and do their thing. We didn't take their scholarships away, surely.
No, they're still under scholarship. So we're paying right now. There are about 50 kids on campus on athletic scholarships that aren't getting to participate in their athletic scholarships. The total cost of ending this football program probably is pushing $10 million.
To end it.
To end it, but we couldn't afford to have it. So figure that out.
Oh man, what a mess. Well, Jack, good luck with the legislature.
Thank you.
That's a job down there. I've wandered the halls. I'm glad there are people like you that want to do that, because I'm not one of them. This is Our Issues Birmingham. Thanks for being with us. And Jack, thanks for being here, as I said before. And we'll see you next time.